And of course, if you have any,
Sorry.
if you have any question during the webinar, you can always raise your hand, or you can write in the chat anything you want to ask, and we are here to help you.
Thank you, Thanos. Okay, Pau, so.
All right, so I'll start now. Good. Well, today I'll be showing you Blender, the basics. I'll be telling you a bit what is Blender for anyone that never heard about it. And then we'll move into showing the basics on how to move around and do the basic tools. And if we have time, probably we can start doing a bit of modeling. That will be the main item to do today. And I don't know if you read the email you got sent, and if not, you can do it now, that you can download Blender. It's free, and you can download it on the main page, is blender.org. And because we're gonna be doing stuff on the program, and if you wanna follow it up and practice a bit with it, it will be perfect.
1 sec, I just sent the link on the chat.
Oh yeah.
For everyone to know.
Thank you. And yeah, so you can follow it up, and it's better for learning and all that. And because it's free and it's very, very light, I believe. So the installation is very easy and very quick. Okay. So yeah, all the questions, whenever we can stop and answer them, no problem. Okay, can you see the presentation here on the screen? Blender basics? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Pau, as Elena said earlier, and I'll be showing you this. So first of all, what is Blender? If you never heard about it, Blender is a tool, a software. Basically, it started as a 3D modeling software, and it was free, open source. So first it started as a very small thing that not many people knew about it, but it's getting bigger and bigger. And today is very well known inside the industries that use it. So it started as 3D modeling, but it also has a lot of tools today that it makes it very, very important. So basically, as you can see here, modeling, rigging, animation, drawing, texture painting, simulation, rendering, video editing, and game creation. And there's many more. I had to search it on Google because I don't even know the full list, and it keeps on going. And there's even more that are not written down. But basically, the mostly is 3D modeling and everything involved with it. As I said earlier, it's a free open source. So that means that the company behind it is not for profit. So basically, they keep developing it, and the source is open. So everyone, any of us, can just go there and get the code, and we can modify it. So if you're not interested in 3D modeling or any of these subjects, you can still work on Blender to improve it. And there's people that more or less make a living from it, and because they make very big projects and they become very important and very useful, so they can be sold to users, and it's very, very good. Well, all these tools, what is it made used for? That's the important thing. And well, it's used for movies. Usually it's like 3D animation, but can be also live action using visual effects. So basically, if it hasn't happened yet, but if we make like a Marvel movie and we make explosions and stuff like that, we could technically make it on Blender because it has like video editing and all that. So we can add everything on it. Games, it's basically the main tool for it nowadays. And you can do like many parts from game development inside Blender without having to jump from program to program. But we'll see later that there are other programs for it. Illustration, so that means like 2D drawings. There's many artists nowadays that start using Blender to make a 3D scene, and then we can take a render or a picture or whatever, and we can draw on it on Photoshop or other Procreate, I think, other drawing applications. But even in Blender, we can draw, and there's many good examples that the illustration there is very, very good. Animations, so basically, obviously in movies, but also in like shorts movies, and there's many on YouTube. And on the main page of Blender, I think they have like a list of projects that free movies, like here an example, Sprite Fright is like the last one that came out. It's very entertaining movies, very nice, and they're free. So it's basically the spirit of Blender, everything free and for everyone. And then advertisements, something that not many people talk, but nowadays is getting more and more track, is the 3D advertisement. So like, for example, I don't know, if you wanted to make an advertisement about fast food, you know, or a restaurant or a car, for example, most of the things are made in 3D software. So for example, to show a cool car with cool effects, they do it on programs. There's many of them, but in Blender, you can do it also. Okay, so why Blender? First of all, there are many programs that can do what Blender does. And I would even say sometimes better because they are more specialized and have more experience. But for example, we have 3D Max and Maya. It's probably the two biggest 3D modeling programs. Maya, for example, is a bit better for animation, as I believe. And for what I've tried, it feels better. And 3D Max is probably like the professional, is the one used in gaming industry the most for 3D modeling. But nowadays, Blender is taking more and more part of it, mostly in indie industry. So small games, small projects. Blender is used usually rather than 3D Max or Maya. I'll tell you why later. Also, ZBrush. ZBrush is used for sculpting. So basically, if we wanted to, I don't know, if we want to make like a cool face or a big monster, usually we use sculpting. So basically with a pencil or with a mouse, we can just like sculpt like if it was made out of clay, but on a 3D environment. But Blender can do it also. So you have so many tools in Blender that many programs can do, but in Blender, it's only one program. It's all in one. It's basically like a Swiss knife of 3D, basically that. AutoCAD, for example, is for architecture mostly and design. AutoCAD is more specialized, but in Blender you can do it. So for a starter, for example, if you are like, I would like to try design, I would like to try architecture, you can start in Blender because it's free, basically. And AutoCAD, 3D Max, Maya, ZBrush, and Houdini, for example, Allure, all of them are paying. Some of them monthly, I believe, but paying. And if you want to get a project in those, I think you have to pay extra. It's like you have to get the company pack, like Adobe, like Photoshop and all that. So Blender is free. Basically, you can make whatever project, you can sell whatever with it made out of Blender, from Blender, and it's free. It's basically, you have free license for everything. And Houdini, well, I didn't say it, but Houdini is basically a 3D environment program, 3D software for visual effects. Usually it's used for movies, big, expensive movies. It's very hard to use, but the results are very good. But as I said, Blender can do it also, but it's not as specialized. Also, another reason why Blender, it has a big community. That's something that at the beginning, we don't think about it, but as soon as we start learning and we need help, because with whatever program we use professionally or in our hobby, we need help. Like we always find like issues that we don't know how to keep going. We need help, or we found a bug, for example, that something that you can find sometimes, and we need help, right? And the best is a program that has a big community, so we can search on it. We can search on YouTube, Google, or forums for that software. And in this one is so big because the community is so big that you will find always a solution for whatever problem you have. Also, it has many tools. As I said, not only the like 3D modeling, sculpting, visual effects, also in another meaning, it's called add-ons, and I'll tell you later about it. when we get in Blender, it's basically add-ons are like when you've run out of tools in Blender, basically, when you need like something more specific, you can find add-ons made from users. So anyone that probably usually what happens is people that are like 3D modeling or animating, and they find something that is not on Blender and they're like, they need it, right? Some people make it themselves. Basically, it's like if you have a carpenter, right? You're a carpenter and you're working with wood and you need a tool, but there's no tool to buy, you make it yourself, basically that. And most of them are free. Some of them are paying, but you can find anything there. So that's a bit more advanced, but you will, if you continue with Blender, you'll end up with add-ons for sure. And also frequent updates, because it's a free software and it's open source. A lot of people contribute into the software and the community adds stuff to it by themselves that then Blender Foundation, that's the company behind it, end up adding into it, but also bugs or missing stuff, they can add it later on. And I don't know now, but probably we could say like around every 4 months, there's a new update for Blender, for good or bad, basically, because if you get updates all the time, it's kind of annoying to update. But at the same time, the best is that whatever bug you find, it might get fixed next update. And basically it keeps up upgrading as time goes on. So for example, 3D Max, I have experience with it, and it lacks many updates that it really needs, but and Blender gets them very, very frequently. And well, the biggest reason, it's free. And it's not a minor thing, because it's free. That means everyone can get in. If we want to learn about 3D modeling, we can get in Blender, learn, and then if we want to move on onto another program, we can do it, and we already know the basics, because Blender has a lot of stuff that shares with other programs, like how to move around the interface. Many tools have the same name. So it's free. It's probably the biggest reason why people should use Blender first, at least. So as I talked earlier, Blender community is a big factor. You can, in Blender.org, the official page, they have a tab on community. And here's a small list. It's a very small list for how big Blender communities are. And basically from these ones, the most I recommend is Blender Artists. In there is basically like a free forum for people to get in, and they post their work, and most importantly, help and tutorials for new people. And it's very, very useful. Also in YouTube, basically there's very big YouTubers there that make tutorials nearly daily on how to do stuff on Blender. So if you ever want to learn more, but you don't feel like getting in Blender, you just want to watch a video of someone, there are some very entertaining also. So yeah, these are some of the communities. And add-ons, as I talked earlier, you can download add-ons from users and you can add them on your Blender, on your software, to improve your experience in Blender. The two biggest ones, I don't feel like we need more than this to add here. It's Gumroad. That's basically, the page is not for Blender add-ons, but a lot of artists there put their add-ons there. Usually are for sale, sometimes are for free, but you can find a lot of add-ons there, or if you find them in another page, they'll direct you to Gumroad, basically to their page. There are very good ones there. Also in Blender Market, there are add-ons, but I believe there are no free ones there. Most of them are paying, but they're very good. So if you one day find a very good add-on and you feel like you really, really need it, Blender Market, you'll find it. Then, well, that's my presentation. Here's like, I explained what Blender is. We'll get started with the interface and I show you how to move around and do the basics, right? If there's any questions, I'll be changing the screen. Okay. Can you see it? Good. It's Blender. All right. If you have Blender downloaded, well, you can start it now, and we'll be moving around the interface. Give me 1 second. Please.
Maybe we can wait a couple of minutes in case
Sure.
you want to download it. Yeah.
Sure. By the way, what we'll do is basically in Blender, I'll show you how to move around, how to do the basic tools. And you don't have to follow it directly. It's not, the end result can differ from person to person today because we're not going to do anything specific. I'll just be showing you tools. And next webinar, we'll be doing a small project, we can say, like a small 3D modeling. So I can showcase the different steps of 3D modeling that, well, for people that never seen how the workflow, it's what it's called, basically, what's the steps you follow. Basically, usually we start like with a reference, what we want to make, then we model it, we make the shape, then we need to add textures, basically painting on it. And then if you want to make a movement of it, we have to do the rigging. So it's basically add a skeleton to it, bones. And then after that, we animate it. So basically it's moving the bones around. And after that, we do the render. We'll do basic renders. We're not going to go very in depth in it because it's a very big rabbit hole that as soon as you start with renders, it never ends. Like it's so big, the capabilities of Blender, that it's impossible to show in a few hours. Okay, so if we're all ready, we could start.
Pau, one recommendation, at least for the next webinar, it will be very useful for all the participants. If you can use 2 screens, at least during the next webinars, it will be more comfortable to you to watch Pau training in one screen and presentation, and in the other screen you can test your skills in Blender.
Yeah, thank you. True, because
here,
you can compare.
We'll talk about it later, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well, okay, so basically here we have Blender. We started basically like this. I think you're gonna get like a window probably in the middle, but there's no way of showing it right now because I already started Blender. But basically you click outside of it and it will close, basically. It's just like a quick start if you need to load a project. We're gonna start something similar like this. First of all, what we need to do that I totally recommend is gonna be better. We're gonna go to the top and we're gonna go to edit. And here in preferences, this is a very important feature, is basically edit Blender on the options about it and keys, basically. Here, what I always do is I change spacebar. You'll have it like this, play. I'll change it to search. Basically, when you press spacebar, instead of play, that means like start the animation, the timeline, that we're not gonna use it. We can switch it to search. So basically we press spacebar and we get like a search bar that we can type whatever tool or whatever thing we need, and it will show up there. It's very, very useful. If you need to change anything here, you can change it, but for today, there's no need. Okay, so we're gonna start like this. Here you can see my the keys I'll be pressing. If you but sometimes I think some of them don't show, but I'll tell you when it's needed. But you can follow here some of them being pressed. Okay, so first of all, here we have the interface. Basically, on the top we have it's basically universal on every program, every software. Usually has the file, edit, and then, well, here we have render. The most important ones are file. Here is going to be new if you want to start a new one. Open already started projects, and we can import new models that we can download from the internet or we already made and we want to put in a new project. Basically, we're not going to use it today. And edit, as I told you, the options, the rest, we're not going to use it. Blender is kind of scary when you start it because it has a lot of options and it's not very, very intuitive at first look. But as soon as you start an experiment, it gets easier and easier. And I'll be just showing you the basic tools. From that, we can do everything. And then we can just experiment and click on different stuff and discover new stuff. Okay. So here we have the what I told you, the taskbar, and then we have presets. Presets are very important for, it's basically already made interface for whatever task we want to make. Basically, what we'll be using is layout, but if we want to go to modeling, it's already started with like already changed windows. Here, it's not a big deal, but for example, UV editing, it's a big thing. We're not going to be talking about it today. Next webinar we'll get into it. Okay, so if we get into layout, this is how the default view is. This is a viewport, by the way. It's this camera. It's a very, very important part of Blender because here is what it represents, the 3D view, what we will see when we take this project and we put it in some other software or we'll make a render. When we start, we get a cube, that's the default shape. This is a light. The light, we don't see it now, but it's basically emitting a light for when we make a render. We'll get different lights, spotlights, basically like a shooting for cameras. We can position the lights and add more or remove. And this is the camera. The camera doesn't affect us now. It's only for renders. But we'll leave it here for now. Okay, so there's different modes. What different modes mean is basically it's different layers of editing a scene, okay? For now, we'll be using object mode, and then we'll move on to different modes. Okay, object mode basically is when we move, we can move, scale, or rotate objects, or add other components like lights, cameras, as I showed you here, or other shapes. So how do we move? How do we start with the basic tools? Basically, we grab an object, and here we have the tools for we can do for this object. So we select it. There's gonna be like a light around orange, and then we can select the different tools. Basically, move. I think many other programs, they use very similar interface, so it's quite intuitive. So basically, we have arrows here. So this is every arrow is for different axes. If we don't like it, the movement, when we move it like this and we don't like it, we can right click on it and it cancels the action. For now, it's not a big deal, but later it will become very, very important. Okay, so here we can move. Then if we change, we can rotate, and we can just select different axes of where, how we want to rotate that object. And if we don't select any of these axes and we just like click randomly, it's called trackball rotation. No one uses that usually, so the best is to use the axis. Now, I'll be showing you a lot of shortcuts. The most common one, as you can see, is Control Z. I think every program nowadays uses Control Z. So basically we can use it here. We do an action, we Control Z, we go back. To go forward, I believe it's Control Shift Z is to go forward, and do a redo, basically. So we're gonna be using that a lot. So after all this, we can do scale, for example. Basically, is the same. It's just arrows, and we can just scale with whatever axis we want. Okay, and we have if we select the outside one, it makes everything bigger. And then we have the transform one that is basically you have all of them together. I don't use it, but here you have it. With shortcuts, it's going to be very, very important, because when you start, there's many shortcuts, but it's good to get used to them, and don't be afraid of the shortcuts, because as you use them, you'll get used to them, and just your brain automatically does it. So for moving, we have G, and we start moving the box, but we're like, we don't have the axis here. So for the axis, if we want to move it along one axis, one line, we press the X, for example, and we get the X axis. If we press the Y axis, it just moves around. The keys don't show up here. It's a problem with this program, but well, I can't do much. But basically, I'll tell you, it's X, Y, and Z. Z ups and down, Y is left and right, it's the yellow axis, and X is the red axis, forward and backwards. Here we can move with G, basically. Then we have R to rotate, and it uses the same axis key. So we press X is this axis, Z this axis, and Y this axis. Okay. If we left click, it confirms the action, and it keeps that rotation. We can still Control Z and go back. And if we don't do any axis, basically it does this rotation that it's not very useful sometimes. Then we have a scale. The scale is S. We have it here. We can scale all of it, all axes, or we can just select the axis as the previous ones, and we can make it bigger like this. Oops, sorry. Ooh, sorry. Z like this, or we can do Y, basically. It's basic tools. But with this, we can do a lot of stuff. Basically adding different shapes, we can just scale them and rotate them. And we're basically kind of halfway there. Okay, so now we're going to do is how to move the camera, because sometimes we want to look behind the object. So here we can move around. It's what we call a gizmo. So basically this helping tools, helping arrows. So if we select X, for example, we get a forward view. If we select Y, we can just look to the side. If we press Z, we look from the top. And if we don't select any of them and we just drag, we can just rotate freely. But there's a shortcut for it also, as everything in Blender. That basically with a numpad, if you have one, if you have a laptop, I believe not all of them have it. So basically the numbers on your right of the key of your keyboard. If we press 1 on the numpad, we get this. It's the front. I believe 3 is on the side, and 7 on the top. So 1 front, 3 side, and 7 top. And basically we can do also rotate a bit with 4, 2, 6, and 8. It's basically the arrows from the numpad, but it's not very useful. And then we can just, this is basically rotating. And also a very important thing, we have it here. It's the orthographic or perspective view. So basically we can, here is orthographic. So basically it means there's no depth of the objects. That's very useful when you're 3D modeling, because it can lead to a lot of confusion. And when you want to make an exact model, you want it orthographic. So everything aligns if you're looking frontally. But later on, when we finish the scene, if we want to render it, we can change it to perspective, and we can see the depth of it. Right now, we don't have much, so you can't see much about it, but usually we want it on orthographic. So basically no depth. It's very useful for modeling. Okay, so now we know how to rotate. Another useful way of rotating, if you don't have a numpad and you want to just rotate freely, is middle mouse. So if we hold middle mouse and we move around, we can just look around the object we have selected. And if we want to go one step further and pan the camera, so basically move it around, so move it to the side or up and down, basically we hold shift and middle mouse and we can move around. So by combining them, we can just move around. And with this, we're completely free. Obviously, I didn't say it, but mouse wheel to zoom in and zoom out, very basic. But yeah, with shift, middle mouse, we move around, and only middle mouse, we rotate the camera. Super, super important, because this is super important to get used to it and be comfortable with it, because you're gonna be moving the camera around a lot. And what I mean a lot is like a lot. Okay, so now that we know how to move the camera, what we're gonna do is basically, we're gonna start with the tools inside the object. So basically how to edit an object. So we already did the scaling, right? With, oh, sorry, I forgot to say that when we scale or when we rotate or when we move the object, also with middle mouse, so the mouse wheel, it doesn't say it here, but I'm clicking on the mouse wheel. And as I'm holding it, I move the mouse and it selects an axis. So if I'm like, okay, I want to move this box to the right, basically I press G, I hold middle mouse and I move my mouse to the right. And when I release middle mouse, it locks this axis. So I can just like, okay, here's where I want it. Left click and finished. Or for example, I want to scale it and I want this axis like this. Middle mouse and we move up and down and it just changes the height of the object. That's very useful because sometimes it's a bit confusing when you've moved around the camera a lot. Sometimes like, oh, is it X, Z or Y when we press on the keyboard? The best is to just like rotate and then middle mouse and we select an axis. That's what I feel most comfortable with, but everyone is free to do whatever they want. You can still use the gizmos here. So click on the toolbar, we just rotate it as we want. Also, when we rotate or when we scale, if we want it to snap, so basically like I grab this cube, right? I'm like, okay, I want to make it double the size, exactly double the size. I press S and just by moving up and I hold Control, it snaps. And if you look on the top left here, wait, sorry, here, you can see the numbers going up and down, X, Y, Z. So if we move it to 2.0000, it means double the size. So that's very useful sometimes when you need the exact measurements of the object. Or for example, something very useful. So if we press numpad 1 to look it from the front, and we want to rotate it like 45 degrees, basically, as you can see on the top left, it shows the angle that we're rotating it, and we can have it at 45 degrees, for example, and left click and we confirm. And we want to keep on going just by holding Control. So as we hold Control, we can snap, and it's not like this that we can tell exactly what angle it is. Well, we can tell, but we can't exactly get the angle we want. Now we can also edit the object here on the right. Usually you won't need it, but if, for example, we need exact size, this cube, it's located at 0, the coordinates. So basically you can see this like moved a bit to the right. So if you put here 0, we got it on the middle of the coordinates. If we want the scale, basically it's like 1 meter of size of each side, we can just move it to 2, for example, and just scale it. Usually you won't need it, but if you need exact measurements and all that, as I said, you can use it here, basically. Okay, also it works for rotation, location, and scale. Everything has snap on it. So it's very, very useful. Okay, if you have any question, if I went too fast with something, you can tell me. Okay, so now that we've done this is probably all of object mode. This is basically when we move around the objects and we edit them a bit. But if we want to model, right, this exact cube, and I'm like, okay, I like this cube, but I want to make it, I don't know, for example, from this face, something come out of it, or make the face smaller, like a shape of a pyramid, for example. How do I do it? So we would need to go up here on object mode, click on it, and we can go to edit mode. Basically, edit mode, it lets you edit the inside of the object. Okay, and here is when a lot of tools, this is where we get all of it. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start like this. Basically, we can select whatever we want, dragging the mouse. If we want to select everything, we can press A and we select all the cube, everything around. If we move around, we can see that we selected everything. And if we want to deselect, so remove the selection, you can left click outside the cube, or we can press A again. No, sorry, just clicking outside or dragging outside. And it removes the selection. So if we want to select one of these are vertices, by the way. I'll tell you now what is what. But basically, if we want to select one vertice, we can do this, or select two, and we select two of them. Now we have three different modes of selection. We have the vertices, so it's basically the intersection between edges. That edges are the lines basically connecting different vertices. And three or more make a face, so it's basically the surface. In my mind, I think of it as like dimensions. So basically, if we click on here, this is vertex mode, so it's like one dimension, so it's like one point. If we go to 2 dimensions, basically just a line, and and 3 dimensions, like 2 different vertices. And basically, this is very important later on for different tools, because some tools need vertices, some tools need edges, and some tools need faces. Okay, so for example, in a cube, and we want to edit only this vertex, so we just select it and we press G. It's the same short keys that we used in object modes earlier when we were moving the cube. We can do exactly the same, but on every vertice, every part of the object. So we just select this part and we press G, and we can just move around the vertice. It's no problem. But if we want to follow just one axis, the same middle mouse, scroll wheel, and we select the axis we want to move it, or we can press, we can press Z to move up and down, Y to move to one side or the other, or X forwards and backwards. It's exactly the same. We can get the gizmos right away here, the arrows, if we want to use the arrows. Here we have move, rotate, scale is exactly the same as the object mode, but here we can edit every single part of the object. So the same with edges, we just click on here and we select edges. If it's kind of like annoying to move up and down all the time and select these little buttons, we can always, using 1, 2, and 3, we can change mode, basically. That's very, very useful. You always need like your one of your hands is going to be on the keyboard all the time with shortcuts. So basically, if we want vertices, we press 1. If we want edges, we press 2. And if we want faces, we press 3. And basically with this, we can just choose whatever we want. So now, basically I didn't show you, but with faces the same, we can just scale them, choose what axis we want. It's always the same. So now we're going to move to a bit more advanced tools. So what I'll be doing is I'll be showing you different tools on this cube and in different selection modes. So probably one of the most important ones is how do we add shapes to this cube? So for example, if we want to make the cube branch out and make another shape around, basically we would select one part of it, and usually we would go to face mode and we press E. This is extrude. Okay, extrude can be found here. Extrude region is exactly the same. So if we just like this, we drag it, we go up and down basically, and if we move the camera, we can just move up and down. As you can see, it leaves like a edges here. That means we can add like shapes to it. So here you can see it, but for example, if I want to make like a branch come out of here, I can just like drag it here, and boom, we already have like a branch coming out, like if it was a tree. Control Z. But as I said, we can use E for easier access, and it already locks on an axis when we do it. But as the same, if we press middle mouse, it just does another axis. Kind of looks ugly a bit now, but you'll see later on it's kind of useful. But for now, we just come out like this and we're done. So we can just extrude parts of the object up and down. It also works for edges. So if you press E on an edge, it makes like a new face. So it just extrudes the edge. And also we can do it with vertices. Basically with the gizmo here, we can just select it, or we can press E also, and we can just like come out of it. Basically, we can use it with every type of selection. So if we Control Z a bit, we're gonna do now we're gonna do a loop cut, I believe. So loop cut is if we want to, for example, if we want to add a waist kind of thing. So if we have this part of the cube here and we want to make like an hourglass shape, for example, where we could go is here by holding left mouse. You can get different options. So we will get loop cut, and we can just like see that it shows up a line. This would be called a loop because it goes around of it. And we can just, it shows where it will come out. So it's like, okay, I want it here. So I left click on it and it creates it basically. Now, if we want to, okay, I don't want it in the middle, I want it more up or down, we can move it. But as you see, it does this weird changing the shape. We don't want that. We can just, we can just move up the axis a bit and we can leave it here, for example. And if we want to add more, and we can move it up, down, no problem. So we can just keep on adding loops for whatever reason we need to. We can just add them all the time, okay? Now, what I prefer to use is instead, if we remove this tool, we press Control R, you get the same tool, but now we can do, if we scroll wheel, we can add more than one loop. So basically 2, 3, as many as we want, just by scroll wheeling. I'm just move up or down the scroll wheel and we get more loops. And it's like, okay, I want to add 2 of them. I just left click on it. And now we get an option to move them around automatically. This is very, very handy. If we don't want them on the middle, if we want them more a bit up or down. So if we're like, okay, no, I changed my mind. I want it in the middle. Just cancel the action, right click. And by pressing right click, it just resets it on the middle. If we don't want it, we just Control Z and we can start again. Control R and we can put 1, move it around and left click and it keeps it there. And now it's like, okay, I want to edit the loop. Basically, a loop is you know, as I said, is different edges that go around the shape. If we want to select the entire loop because we remove the selection and we want to edit it, we hold Alt and then we left click on an edge, and it, as you can see, will select the entire loop. That's very useful, for example, when we're doing a cylinder, for example, and we want to make an hourglass, as I said, and we want to just add edge loop in the middle. We just Alt left click and we select the entire loop, and then we can edit it as I showed you earlier. We press S and we can resize it, make it smaller, make it bigger. We can also rotate. Really weird, but we can do it. We can do this, and also we can move it. So if we want it to be like a bit moved to the left, to the right, no problem. Now we'll leave it here a bit. We'll scale it a bit like this, right? Like an hourglass shape. We can do. Oh, sorry. Press G, and we can move it around. It's all the same tools. Basically, you have like 3 shortcuts, then you can use them for every other action in Blender. They're very universal. Okay, so now that we've done edge cuts, we'll be like, okay, but what if I want to make a hole on it? So for example, if we're making a cup, or I don't know, many shapes that can have a hole in it. Basically, what we do is we select a face, and we go to here, inset faces. And basically, as it's selected, it comes out this circle. We click on it. Sorry. Wait. Well, it's not going to work. Sorry, did I select a good one? It's not. It's not working now. I did something wrong, but whatever. What we're going to do is the best way is for extrude. So if we want to make a hole, we press E, right? It comes out, but we want to make a hole inside. So what we do is we left click, we cancel it, but then we resize it pressing S. And as you can see, it makes like a inside face. So this is what we call inset face. So we can have this, and then we extrude again, and we end up with a hole, basically. If we didn't do this, if we didn't do the release it and make it smaller and then make the hole, what we would end up with is this, that it's not very good, because basically it's creating faces on this side and on the other one. And it makes this like weird looking. It's not very good. So what we want to do is basically first extrude, cancel the action. Then with S, we make it a bit smaller, and then extrude again. And we can make a hole. Okay. This becomes very, very useful later on. We can use it the same as for like branching out. So if we just extrude, cancel with the right click, and then resize it, and then extrude again. Basically, we just make this. And if we want to make it more like a wedge shape, we can just grab this loop by holding Alt and left clicking on it. And then we can press G, select this axis, and we have this wedge shape, basically. With this is basically very basic tools, but are like the most fundamental ones and the ones we're going to be using the most. And there's another tool. It's called Bevel. It's used a lot in other jobs, professions, basically like clay or carpenters. Basically, Bevel is, we could say is like softening an edge. So for example, here, if we thought this is like a cup, but it feels very unrealistic, it's very sharp, it's very cubic, we can just select Bevel. Then we click on the gizmo, and we get this, as you can see, it comes out edges, right? This one, we're gonna do it like this, right? Like this one, for example. And if we want a right angle, we're just gonna do like this. And it adds like a in between, so basically a 45-degree kind of same angle to make it a bit softer. But we have another option. It's like, okay, it still feels unnatural. It's a bit too little. It's not round enough. We want it more round. We're gonna Control Z, and we're gonna repeat it. Okay, and as we drag it, don't release. We scroll wheel, and we can add more edges to it, basically. So as you can see, it makes it a bit more round. We can go crazy with it. We can just add a lot of them, but I wouldn't recommend it at this stage. It's not very useful. But yeah, you can do this a lot. If we just hold Alt and we select different loops like this, I'm going to select this one. Also, I forgot to say that to add to the selection, so if we select this loop and we want also this loop here, as we hold Alt, we hold also Shift, and then we left click. So Alt, Shift, and left mouse, and we add to the selection. And we can just select these loops, for example, and we can just do another bevel like this. And as you can see, if we press Tab, by the way, we can change to object mode quickly, but we can do it still here, and we can see the shape of it. It's a bit softer. So for some applications, very good. Also, no need for also being softer. Also, sometimes we want to just add more edges to a surface in a quick way. So we can do bevel instead of edge loop that we did earlier, the loop cut, sorry. So for example, here, right, we want to add more, or here, for example, the hourglass, we want to make it more softer. Basically, as we have bevel selected, we just drag, scroll wheel, and we have this. We press Tab. I like to press Tab so we can look at it without the wires around. And look around, basically just a shape, but now it's softer. It's basically very good for doing that. I recommend not go overboard with extrude at the beginning, and later on when the model that we're making is more complex and more detailed, then we can go and add more bevels. Okay, so now that we have bevels, what we're gonna do is, well, we've done loop cut, by the way, as I told you here. We're gonna do knife. Knife, usually you don't use it that much sometimes, and sometimes you use it a lot. It's a very specific tool, but can come in very, very handy, okay? So knife, basically, as the name says, is imagine we have a virtual knife and we want to add an edge to a specific part, and we don't know exactly how to do it, or it's a very weird part, or for whatever reason, the loop cut doesn't work, right? I believe if we go, for example, loop cut here, for example, right? And we want to make a line that goes from this vertice to this vertice, for example, for whatever reason. We want to make a line from here to here. As you can see, the loop cut is going a bit crazy. We've added so many shapes that doesn't know exactly how to get there. We can use the knife. And the knife is basically very basic. So we click on a vertice. It will automatically snap to it. And basically, as you can see the line, it's telling you where it's going to cut through. And I don't know if you can see it. It's very faint, but has this green square that's telling you where the vertice is going to be made. So the purple line is going to be an edge, and where it ends, it's going to start the vertice. For example, it's going to be a vertice here. There's going to be another one here. And we want to go to this part, for example, for whatever reason. So we can just click on it and it keeps going. So we can just like loop around. We don't want to add any edge here. So we can just like click on here and it's not gonna do anything because there's already an edge existing here. And then we can do the other side. And to finish it, we press enter. And we have the edge done. That's very, very important sometimes when the shape is complex enough that Blender can't recognize automatically what you want if you want a very exact cut. So the knife is kind of like it's basically like a paper cutter. So you have just your surface and you can just cut whatever shape we want. Now, for example, right, if we want to make like a exact shape, we can just do this, and if we remove this, we have a triangle. And sometimes you'll need it, depends on what you're working on, you'll need it or not, okay? And now, this is the knife. Then you'll be like, okay, but I still need it to be exact on the middle, for example. So if I click, you can also click outside, basically it's a projection. So basically what you see is where it's gonna cut through from your angle. If you want it to be on the middle of these face edges, we can just hold shift. And as you can see, the green dot is not moving. If we go this way, it does it automatically on the middle. So it calculates the middle of the face and it makes the edge. Okay, but you always got to remember that knife doesn't go through the entire shape. So you have to keep turning around if you want to make a loop, for example. Okay, so I'll just remove this tool. So now that we've done this basic stuff, we have the knife, we have poly build, but this is a bit more complex. Then we have spin that basically is grabbing shapes and editing them, like adding edges and all that stuff. It's not very useful in my opinion, but there will be moments that you'll need it, right? I believe this one, for example, can come in handy, the spin, for when we want to make a tube, for example. We can just do this and it adds shapes to it, but we're not gonna go in depth with it, okay? Then smooth, there's no need. And another one that's very important, it's edge slide. So basically, if we are like, okay, I like this wedge shape, but I want it not that long. I want it to be more shorter. Basically, what we're gonna do is we're gonna select the edge loop. So holding Alt, we click on it and it selects the loop and we can just drag it. And what it does, it slides on it. So it's different from moving. Moving, for example, as you can see, it doesn't change the size of that loop. But if we slide on it, as you can see, it follows this edge. That if we do the other way, it does the same. Okay, it follows, it just slides on it, basically. To do it quickly, slide, it's pressing G. So when we're moving it, and then we press G again. And as you can see, it tells you what edge is following, sliding on, and basically it slides on it. That comes in very handy sometimes. For example, in here, right? If we want to just change a bit the shape of it and make the base a bit longer, for example, we can just slide on it, okay? So we have it here. And now another important part of it, shrink and fatten, it's not very useful. We'll probably look into it when we model next webinar. But what I want to show you is this one. This is very important also. Shear. It's a bit more complex, but it comes in very handy. So for example, if we want to make, okay, this is going to be like a tube, for example, and we want this tube to go like do a 90-degree angle, for example. So if we extrude like this, and then we move it here, you'll be like, what is this, right? We can rotate it. If we do this, Holding control, we snap on it. And as you can see the angle, 90 degrees, we got the angle. But it does this weird changing the shape that we could do it manually by just rotating it. But see, it still does a very weird shaping on it. So a very useful thing is shear. Shear basically is a bit confusing at the beginning, but you will see later on, it comes in very, very handy. So basically, we have different axes to select on it. What we're going to use is this cyan axis. So basically, we drag it and holding control again, we can just snap on it. And as you can see on the top left, it says 0.4, 0.5. As we reach 0.5, that means it's the half of it. So 45 degrees. And then we can just move it around, for example. And it kept the shape together. It didn't change of it. Okay. So for example, if we redo it again, we just shear. We can select the cyan, hold control, 0.5, and then we extrude, and we can keep going. Basically, we can just keep going like this, sorry, like this, and we can do different tubes. Okay, so this is the basics of how to model. If you have any question, you can ask. But basically, this is the basic tools that we're going to be using for modeling. And I'll be showing you other shortcuts, other stuff that we can do for editing the shape. So for example, we want to remove stuff. Okay, we've added a lot of stuff and we're not happy with how it looks. So for example, we're like, okay, I don't like this. Or for example, here, I just don't like this hourglass shape. It has too many loops. I just want to remove it. So basically what we're going to do is, as many programs, we just press delete. And here we get many different options. We get vertices, edges, and faces. Basically, if we delete vertices, it's basically going to delete all the vertices that we had selected. So if you press 1, we can see which ones we selected.
Sorry,
So
Pau?
Yep.
Sorry, someone in the chat is asking if you could do another bevel.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So we
Thanks.
changed to edge mode. Usually the best way to do bevels is edge mode. So pressing 2, we hold Alt, we click on it, we get a loop. And basically pressing Control B is the shortcut. We can get a bevel. If we don't want to use or we don't remember the shortcut, it's here, bevel, and we can drag it. And then as we're dragging it, it has to be at the same time. We can just scroll wheel. It doesn't show it, but I'm scroll wheeling up and down, and it adds more edges to it, basically. Okay. So again, the shortcut is Control B for quick bevel, and we get the same. We can just, by moving the mouse, I'm not clicking anything, I'm just moving the mouse, and then scroll wheel to add more or less, and then to confirm, left click. And if we want to cancel it, or we don't want it, I don't want to do bevel anymore, right click, and we're back to step 1. Okay. And yeah, bevels, you can, by the way, bevels, you can use them on any type, even if it's not a loop, which is going to do some weird shapes sometimes. But as you can see, it looks very nice. And it's a very quick way of smoothing edges. Okay. So, okay. So now deleting, right? We were on deleting. If we want to delete an edge, there's many different ways, depending on what you want. So for example, if we want to delete this face, we want to make it empty on the inside. What we do is we select the face on face mode. So this one, we select the face, we press delete, but here we have a problem. If we delete vertices, right, we press 1, we can see we have these vertices selected. So if we delete them, it's going to delete the entire shape. Sometimes you will need it, sometimes not. But for our case, we just want to make a hole in it. So we don't want that. So Control Z, we're going to press delete again. And we have edges Edge is going to delete only the edges selected. So if we press 2, we can see what edges we have selected. So it will delete only these ones. So let's try edges, and it's going to show us these ugly edges that we don't want in this case. So we Control Z again. What we're going to do is delete, and now yes, faces. Basically, it just deletes the face you have selected, nothing else. So now we have an empty shape. It's a hole. Now from this, for example, we're like, okay, I like this, but now I want to make it, how to say it, thick, right? I want to make the wall of it, of the object, I want to make it thick. So basically we can just extrude. So pressing E, just moves around. We don't want that. So right click to cancel it. It still has done the extrude, but it's on the same position as where we started. It doesn't, you can't see it here, but you have to be very careful, because if like, okay, I don't want to do the extrude, forget about it. You have to remember that you still have the extrude, because if I press G to move it, you can see there's still the edge. So you have to be very careful when you extrude, that if you cancel the action and you want to remove it, we would need to do is or Control Z, and we don't have it anymore. As we press G, we don't have it anymore. Or we can do is, you can see it here, we press delete, and what we do is we delete vertices, and we are back with the same loop from the beginning. But what we wanted right now is to make the walls thicker, right? So we extrude, we cancel, and what we do now is we press S to resize it. And as you can see, it makes the walls thicker, but it doesn't make them the same way. Like the top part is a bit thinner than the right side. So if we want to edit it a bit, as the previous tools we used, scale, so S, and then middle mouse with this axis. And as you can see, we can get the walls to be the same thickness for both sides, right? So we're gonna do that. We're gonna like this, and we have it. Now, if you want to keep on doing the extrudes from the tools, or we want to do it with shortcuts, I'll be showing you shortcuts, because honestly, it's the best way to learn software, in Blender, obviously too, shortcuts. As soon as you start using shortcuts, the faster you'll start working on it, and the more comfortable we'll be. So we press E again. And as you can see, it comes out again, but we're like, no, we want to go inside of it, right? To make the walls. So we just middle mouse, we lock on this axis, and we just move in. And we're just gonna release it here. So left click to confirm. And as you can see, we have the inside of it. It's like, okay, yeah, but now it's kind of ugly, because if we just look inside, we can see the inside of the object. We want to close this hole, right? Now comes a very important thing that it's called fill, I believe. Basically, what we do is we select a hole in this case. So with Alt and left click, we select the entire loop, and we're like, okay, we want to close it. So basically, what we will do is we will add a face. So basically, like another wall, basically. So what we do is we press F, and it adds a face. So basically, as you can see, it's the exact same loop, just that it added a face, right? So as you can see, it comes out. So we're just going to release it. And now we close that hole. So we have it like this, right? So we can close whatever loop. So for example, okay, for example, we're not going to do it now, obviously, but for example, if we are making like, for example, now this looks like a camera right now, right? If we wanted to make a lens, for example, like made out of glass, we still need to make a lens here, a glass. So for example, we would need to do is press F here, and it's closed, right? If we're like, okay, now we have this that we'll paint it as glass, so we will be transparent and we'll be able to see the inside of the camera. But now I want to edit it, and what do? I can't see the inside. That's very easy. What we're gonna do is we're gonna press Z, and here we have different options that basically solid means what we are right now. So all the faces are showing. And we want to see the inside. So we need to have the faces a bit transparent or completely transparent. So basically what we're going to do is wireframe. So basically what it does is makes nearly completely transparent the faces of it. And now we can select the inside of it. As you can see, by the way, if we press 1, the vertices look the same, edges look the same, but faces now look a bit different because they're so transparent. They have this dot in the middle. So it's easier to select them through other faces. So we can select the inside of it. As you can see, it's the inside. We have it selected and we can still edit it. You can still scale it, no problem. Press like, okay, I want to go back. So we press Z again, and then left click and select solid. It's like, okay, but I prefer, I want, for example, a more in between. So we want to see the faces, but at the same time, see through a bit. This is a very, very, very useful part is Alt Z, and it's like an in between, basically. But we're not going to be using it right now. But yeah, Alt Z to do like this halfway through, or holding Z, we can do wireframe or solid. The other ones are rendered and material preview, where you can find them here, basically, wireframe, solid. Solid, basically what it means is you can see the faces, but it's not rendering anything. So lights, it completely ignores any light that you have. So when you want to do a render and you have a lot of lights, the model is very complex, your PC is gonna struggle a bit. So we can have this mode that basically it's faster. It doesn't do any calculations about light. But we're like, okay, but I added color to it. I wanted to see a bit of light. We can go to viewport shading and we can see the materials. We don't have any material now, so it just looks white. And the last one will be rendered. So it's basically with the light, it looks a bit prettier, but as we haven't done much, it's not a big deal. But as the time we add more and more stuff, it's gonna become more and more heavy for the PC. So usually what we do is we work on solid. So it's this one, holding Z, it's a quick menu. So basically we have this, okay? So we can, as I said, we can remove a face if we don't want this by just pressing delete faces, and we can still, we can see the inside. Okay, but I want to remove these, for example, this edge without removing the shape, without removing the faces. How do I do it? It's exactly the same. We select the edge, we press delete, and we ignore these ones, and we're gonna go to dissolve. Basically, as the name says, dissolve is basically like removing it, but keeping more or less the shape of it, like keeping all the rest. So basically we can dissolve vertices. It's gonna look weird because at this point we're not using vertices, we're using edges. So what we're gonna do is delete, dissolve edges. And as you can see, I'll show it better. Delete, dissolve edges. And what it does, it just deletes that loop, but it keeps the faces. So it just automatically Blender calculates where that face is gonna go. So as we've done that, right, we can dissolve stuff. We can do, for example, we can do different shapes, right? So for example, if we do some extrudes and we're like, okay, I don't like this, I want to remove it. This part, we're gonna do delete, only faces, sorry, faces. And I'm like, okay, oh, I removed this part now. And here we have a hole. So as we did earlier, we just select the entire loop, press F, and we cover it. And we're gonna do the same on the other side. Press F, and we cover it. It's like, okay, now I have this cube here that we can select, hold Z, by the way, and we can just select the entirety of it. Because if we press A, it selects the entire shape. So we just want this cube. So holding Z, wireframe, or Alt Z, we can do this basically, and we have only this cube selected. And we're like, okay, I want this cube, but now attach it to this side, for example. So to attach it, we can do it, for example, adding faces to it. So for example, we're gonna add, let's do it in here. We want to attach this cube to this face. What we're gonna do is basically always delete the faces that are gonna be connected. And do like this, delete and faces. And now we have two holes. And now what we have to do is basically select every edge, this and this, and we press F. And it makes a face. Now these ones, it makes another face. You don't need to select all of the faces as long as you select these two. These ones are connected, so we press F and it does it. Can we use relative coordinates when we are doing bevel or extrude? Yes, we can do it. So as we've done this, so for example, as you asked the question, we can do bevel, we can do this. And we're like, okay, I want it more exact. I want it a bit more precise. As you can see here, most of the actions, if not all, after doing them, yeah, as you can see, also rotate. When we confirm the action, we get this little pop-up here. So bevel, sorry, Control B, we do the bevel, and we get this pop-up here. So when we click on it here, you get a lot of options. I'm not gonna go into it right now, but basically you can choose what exactly you want of the bevel, because some bevels you want them more something else, and Blender does whatever you want sometimes. So we can here select exactly the distance of the bevel. Like this.
Sorry, Pau.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just a reminder that we're supposed to finish at 7. So I don't know if maybe it's 10 minutes only left. So
yeah, it's.
Is it okay? Just
Yeah. That's it. I showed the.
Okay, sorry. You still have 10 minutes. You still have 10 minutes, so you can carry on. Sorry, just wanted to remind you.
Thank you. But yeah, I show you most of the tools. I'll just answer the questions. But basically, for bevels, you can have the options here. Always remember that if you click outside of it, the pop-up disappears. So we will need to repeat the action. So Control B, confirm, and then we can just choose here how many segments we want, the shape of it. That's also, now we don't use it. But for example, if we want like, a bevel, I want it in a precise shape. So instead of being just a normal curve, we want it to be more of an exponential curve, for example. We can choose whatever shape we want in more advanced settings, but we're not going to do it now. We just do this. And I think that answers your question about the coordinates. It's basically a local distance, basically, is the depth of it, of the bevel. So I think that answers your question. Also, we can use percentage, by the way. It's different modes. Basically, like saying like normal coordinates, or like the local coordinate, or global coordinates, different stuff, basically. That's it all. I can show you quickly another random tools that are not used exactly for modeling, but you can still, they can be helpful. So for example, for measuring, we can do measure here, and we can just dragging, we can get different measurements. That can be, if we need, like, for example, design, if we need exact measurements, we can just measure stuff, as you can see. And with the control set doesn't work with them. So what you have to do is like select them and delete if we don't want them. And we can also draw on Blender. We can just take notes. If we want to add some changes to it, we want to add some changes, but we don't know exactly how to do it, and we want to have like a reference quickly, we just like, okay, I want to add an extrude here like this, right? So, okay, perfect. Now I just, okay, I don't need it anymore. I just hold here, erase, and we remove it. And that's basically the extra tools you're gonna need. But I think we've seen most of it, of the tools that we would need. Also, if you want to move around the object in more precise coordinates, not about bevel, but rotation scale, we can press N. It's this, you will have it like this. and we can just transform whatever we have selected in exact coordinates. So if we select everything, for example, it will be the same as location. But if we want to just move one face, we can just, we can just move it up and down, and we have this, basically. I don't know if you have any other questions you can ask.
Thank you, Pau. That was very well explained. Even I can do it.
I think I went a bit too fast, but now seeing the time,
No,
probably, yeah.
Well, I don't know if anyone has any questions. Maybe someone, we still have 5 minutes. So if anyone has any doubts.
What it sounds very confusing, everything, and there's a lot of stuff to do. What I recommend to do is, for example, for next webinar, this is going to be on the 9th, right? We're going to do a basic shape altogether. If you want to start and just like play with it, just don't be afraid of the program. Just try, just do random shapes, and you'll get used to it, and you'll see how everything works. And also, if you want, there's like a lot of tutorials that can show you like specific stuff, like, okay, this bevel doesn't look like I want it. How can I do it? And there's many tutorials and they'll tell you how to do it. So if you practice for next webinar, will be great because you'll be a bit more fluent with it and it will be easier for you to follow. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Just a reminder that I will send an evaluation form to everyone after this meeting. And I don't know if Thanos, maybe you want to give me a hand here if there's.
Well, I just want to thank also Pau. It was very interesting, the presentation, and very detailed. Thank you, Pau.
Yeah.
I don't want to add anything else. Maybe
Okay.
you can add the link here in the chat before you close the meeting, the webinar.
Sorry, the link?
Yes, maybe. Well, of course, you can send it after the webinar with a mail because.
The evaluation form, you mean?
Yes. I
of
mean,
course.
the evaluation form.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I will do it.
But I'll just post a link of a website for learning about Blender, CG Cookie. That basically what they do here is they have tutorials, they have introductions, and also a bit of like forum, like what artists do, and like a bit of articles kind of saying, like news of Blender and recommendations. So you can use it.
Yes, thank you, Paul. This will be very useful. Basics. Very good.
Okay, so I've sent the form. It's in the chat for everyone. Okay, well, so I didn't see the form.
It's not in the chat.
It's not?
No.
Oh, sorry. It has sent as a direct. Sorry.
Yes, it's not in the chat.
It's been sent to you. I don't know how to.
Okay.
I don't know how to remove this. Sorry to everyone.
Okay, I will do it.
It's done. Okay.
It's okay.
Sorry,
it's okay. Yes.
Now should be there. Can you all see it?
Okay. Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, Elena.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can go to this link and evaluate this webinar. And we are looking forward to see you again in about 2 weeks.
Okay, well, see you in 2 weeks, everyone. Thank you, Thanos, for your help today as well.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all.
Speak soon.
See ya.
Pau, estàs aquí encara?
Sí, 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 sí. Sí.
Vale, ara et truco, d'acord?
Vale.
Espero que marxin i truco.